Welcome back, True Crime Besties. It's Meg and Emma.
Welcome back. Thanks for coming along to our second ever episode. We've been really looking forward to getting back in and recording again. How have you been going, Meg?
Yeah, good. I've enjoyed looking into this one. It's been a little while since I'd gone into this topic, so I'm really excited to talk about it today. How about you? How have
Yeah.
you been going?
Very, very well. I feel the same way. So today we're talking about JonBenét Ramsey, and I feel exactly the same. I feel as though, um, back when this happened in 1996. It's all anyone could talk about or think about, and I remember hearing about it at the time. So to kind of go back and sort of reacquaint myself with the case and with all of the evidence that's sort of come since that I haven't really known much about, it's been really fascinating.
Yeah, I think this is one where it's been a huge true crime story for so long, back since 1996. But there's this new wave of true crime, new generation of true crime interest people that this has now got another wave to it. That there's people out there who don't even know about this case because they're too young.
Yeah.
But then there's those of us who have been, have known about this case since the beginning of it, or it's just been a topic for so long. I mean, I guess it would be probably up there with the Madeleine McCann in terms of, world recognition of a child that's been, well, murdered and, yeah, and
And
also,
nobody knows who did it. I think
yeah,
obviously that's the most intriguing thing, is that, there are multiple theories as to who murdered her.
absolutely.
And that's what makes this so fascinating. I guess that's the reason we wanted to do it too, because especially so early on, because there is so much information around and so many different theories, and we thought, no, we can really sort of get our teeth stuck into it. So
hmm There's such a big difference between a solved crime, which is fascinating in itself,
yeah,
but then unsolved is just a whole nother kettle of fish. Like, I
yeah,
mean, you think these days, like with, evidence of what we can find from cold cases as well as new cases, you sort of, I think, in some ways, I mean, me being as innocent as I am, I'd be like, if I did something, I would be found out. Like, because there's so much technology and things to be able to, like whether there be cameras or DNA, all these things to be able to solve a crime. And even then covering cold cases where DNA has become so huge in cold cases now, being able to solve cases that from so long ago, when DNA wasn't a thing, but things are still kept that can be used. That to think that this case is still unsolved is, I mean, unbelievable.
it's kind of mind blowing. But and I know we'll get into this a little bit later on, but the the case was absolutely botched right from the get go. So I guess people probably very broadly know a little bit about JonBenét Ramsey and her murder. So it happened in 1996 on Christmas Day, and her body was found in the early hours of Boxing Day. Um, and her mum awoke to find a ransom note at the bottom of the stairs. And yeah, the case kind of went from there. There's a 911 call that you can hear online. It's really readily available. Just Google the JonBenét Ramsey 911 call,
hmm
and it's very fascinating. People have theories about the
This
call in
is,
and
and
of
that's the thing with this
itself.
case. From the literal get go of this becoming, a case, there are question marks
Yeah,
that still to this day have question marks over them. Like,
yeah. I don't know about you, but I just found really ebb and flow when I look at the evidence and I look at different perspectives, and I think I can really see both sides of the story. But
mhm,
I guess starting from the very beginning, Patsy made the phone call, the 911 call to the Boulder Police Department. So this happened in Colorado, where the family was living at the time. And she was absolutely desperate sounding on the call, as you would, if this had happened to you. But I think it's really interesting to note. So the first police arrived to the scene, or to the house, at about 5:55 a.m. And Patsy was fully dressed, fully made up,
yeah, yeah,
like full makeup, at 5:55 a.m. And I guess this is of note too, she was wearing the clothes that she'd worn to the Christmas party or to the Christmas dinner she'd been at the night before.
Which many people, I mean, for some people that may not seem weird, but for Patsy Ramsey, people were immediately like, that's not typical of her. You know,
Yeah.
as in like she was someone who would very well put together, and which is obviously who answered the door that morning was someone who was very well put together, makeup, all that sort of thing, but she was not someone who would wear the same outfit 2 days in a row.
No.
Let
And
alone an
even though,
outfit that,
so
was for like a cocktail-ish kind of party. So then for a 6 a.m. wake up kind of thing,
yeah,
to wear the same outfit was not at
just
all.
unheard of. To be made
Yeah.
up, maybe not so much, because they were actually meant to be traveling really early that
Mhm.
day to visit. So JonBenet's dad, who was named JonBenét Ramsey, so that's who JonBenet was named after. He had older children from a previous relationship, and they were traveling via their private plane to go and see them then on Boxing Day morning really early. So the fact she had makeup on, okay, you could probably excuse that. She's woken up early to get herself ready to go, but wearing the same clothes as the night before, as you say, that sort of seems a bit suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah, because I
So
mean, well, according to what her statement is that she had been to bed, that they had all been asleep. So,
yeah,
yeah, to be dressed in the same clothes as the night before indicates that maybe she didn't go to bed.
yeah, I think that's one of the theories, is that she actually never went to bed. So
Mm.
her statement is that she woke up early. She's gone downstairs. So from what I can gather, the house had two staircases, one sort of at the back of the house that led from the bedrooms to the kitchen area. And she's gone down that staircase, and at the bottom of the stairs, sprawled along like the one of the stair treads, was this ransom note,
Mhm.
and it is chaos. So Patsy has read the letter, apparently, according to John's statement, has screamed, and he's come down knowing something was terribly wrong. They've gone up to have a look in JonBenet's room, and I think in the meantime, Patsy was dialing 911 and making that call. And they've gone and checked Burke's room. So Burke is JonBenet's older brother. I think he was 10 years old at the time
Yeah, 9 or 10. Yeah.
to JonBenet's 6 years of
Mhm.
age. And because apparently sometimes she'd go in and sleep in his room as well, but she wasn't in there either. I think Burke was still asleep at that time. So the police come at 5:55 in the morning, and they don't secure the house as a crime scene. So right from the get-go, this was absolutely botched. I
Yeah.
mean, so in bits and pieces that I've read about this, they say that there were never any murders. There wasn't even a homicide squad in Boulder because
No,
there were just never any murders in Boulder.
that's it. There
But
was no homicide squad. Yeah.
and I don't know, is it a different thing now that because we're so addicted to true crime, we know that you need to preserve a crime scene, but you would think even basic policing would show that
Yeah. Even
would
to this day, the Boulder police are still holding on to this case. They haven't let anyone else have a crack at it.
yeah.
Even though at the time there was Denver next door who had far more homicides, offered to help. They weren't wanting to take the case over. They wanted to help and offer people. And the FBI even, I think, offered people and offered help, and they didn't ask for it.
I
Therefore,
think the
that
FBI were involved a little bit, but not they certainly haven't taken over the case or
no,
anything.
yeah,
Yeah. Um what I find absolutely astounding is that twice the police went through the house between sort of 6 a.m. and to try and find, I don't know, evidence, JonBenet, whatever they were looking for, anything
mm
to show what might have happened. And in that time, friends and family came over
yep.
and to the
I think
house and were
they pretty
walking
much
through.
that when the police first arrived, I think even at 5:55 a.m., there was already friends at the
A
house.
friend was already there, yep,
Yeah,
and I think their pastor or
yeah,
there's
he got there
some
pretty quickly
religious,
too.
yeah, were
Yeah,
there very quickly, and I can understand the family needing that comfort at the time, but again, they needed to move people. Like, people should never have been allowed to enter that house. What is absolutely mind-blowing is that at 1 p.m., John and one of his friends were asked to just do a sweep of the house themselves. So the father of the missing, at this stage, missing child and his friend were told to have a look around the house and see if anything looked amiss. And they went down to the basement and into a room that clearly hadn't been previously searched by police.
I think
And
someone had
they,
opened the door but not gone
yeah,
in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was dark. There were no windows to that room. Is that right?
There wasn't. I think someone had felt for a light switch, couldn't find it, so didn't bother looking any further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So John's gone in there and he found the deceased body of JonBenet. And immediately, and I do not hold this against him at all, he picked her up and sort of ran her upstairs. And I think in interviews I've seen from him, he said he knew immediately that she was gone. He said in that moment he felt relief that he'd found her and that she was at home with him, but then obviously the realization that she was no longer with them, that hits really hard.
Yeah.
It's astounding to me that the police would even suggest that a family member would go and search the house. And
Especially because
imagine,
we do know that, what is it? The statistics are huge that a child that is missing or is killed, that more than likely it's someone who knows the child.
I think the stats are 12 to 1. So
Yeah.
it's 12 times more likely that somebody they know has committed or perpetrated the crime.
Yeah. All those people should have been taken, all the adults from that home should have been removed and taken to a neighbour's house or the
Yep.
police station or
Yep.
somewhere else other than in that home, and
Yeah.
let the police do their job. Like, I understand that that's where your safe place would be in your own home, but at that point in time, wouldn't you want to do whatever you had to do to get your daughter back? Because I mean, it
Absolutely.
went from it was a ransom, it was a kidnapping, it wasn't a murder yet.
That's
Like, to
it.
me, when it flicks to it, then it's, well, then you've got a dead child. It's a completely different investigation. But surely they needed to check every part of that house in terms of where an intruder could have got in, or where, if it was truly a kidnapping, they needed to see what the house looked like
Yeah, and
from where
where
this
could they
person
have
could
gotten
have
in? Where did
entered.
they take her out? How did
Did
they
they
get
leave
her
something
out?
behind that, was there, a broken window or this? How did they get her out? How they, where'd they
Mm,
go? That kind of stuff. There could have been something around that house that could have helped them, and
yeah,
they missed that. They missed that opportunity. But yeah, obviously that wasn't what actually took place anyway. But yeah.
that's it.
Mm.
And so I guess when they found her deceased body and he brought her upstairs, that's disturbed the crime scene down in the basement. It's
Mhm.
disturbed potentially any evidence that was on her body.
Yeah.
And I mean, the way he found her, she was wrapped in a blanket, I think, or had a blanket laying on top of her. Um, and she was bound with white rope. And I think they knew that she'd been struck in the head as well at that time.
Mm.
It
She
was
had tape
fairly
over her mouth,
fairly obvious. Yes, she did have tape
which
over
he
her mouth.
immediately took off, didn't he? Like, when he
Yeah.
first found her in the basement, and he took the
Yeah.
tape off her mouth straight
And
away.
again, I can understand that because had she been
Mhm.
alive, he wanted her to breathe.
Yep.
That again, I can
Yeah.
understand that instinct to do that. And also, he's not a trained professional.
No. That's why, I mean, like, as a parent, as much as you wanna find your child, I would not wanna be the one finding my child like that.
Oh, no way. How
Oh,
traumatic.
God. No.
Horrible.
Absolutely horrendous.
Yeah. So I guess when they've taken her body away to examine her and see what happened, what did they find? They found,
Well, yeah, I guess bit of a trigger warning, obviously,
yeah,
because we will discuss, the fact that, what sexual abuse, and what went on here. We don't know all the answers, at all, because I've read a few conflicting, bits of medical information around the autopsy that was done. So this, again, this case being as botched as it was, and things not being preserved as they should have been, I don't think we have accurate information.
yeah,
But yeah, that they did. There was evidence to suggest that there was sexual assault. Um, I don't know, do you know more about
Yeah,
that?
so what I have sort of looked into with regard to that is, I mean, it says it's one of the reports that I read, I think it was, I can't remember where it came from actually, but it said that she wasn't raped, she was just sexually assaulted.
Mm,
But to me, she'd been penetrated, and
yes.
that is rape. um, Another reason they said that it was just a sexual assault as opposed to rape was because they didn't find semen in or around her body.
No.
Again, that does not exclude rape. I
Mhm,
guess
mhm.
I don't know if definitions have changed since 1996 as well, but I've found the wording around that and the description of that really
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yep. Yep.
um,
Like, 'cause there
yeah,
was DNA evidence, but it was only trace evidence, so there's been sort of some back and forth, I think, around the fact of how much DNA was there, that whether that was
that's right.
enough to even be someone present at that time, or whether it was, just from, like, a piece of clothing that had maybe been touched by
Yeah,
somebody else at
yeah,
another time, and then she was wearing it, and therefore it came off of that clothing.
that's it.
Something like that could have been
Like
where the
transfer
DNA came
DNA.
from,
Yeah,
because it wasn't enough DNA to really solidly believe that a person had, yeah, that it was potentially an object rather than
yeah. I think
penetration
back
with.
in when they did the first DNA analysis, which I think was in 2006, they found one unknown male DNA
Mm,
profile, and then they've used better sequencing techniques. I think it was in 2018 from memory,
yeah, that's enough.
and they found that there were potentially two unknown male DNA profiles. Um, but it's really hard to say because they weren't able to get complete profiles from both men. They can say that there's different male DNA there, but it's very difficult to determine. I'm guessing. Oh, sorry, it was 2016, not 2018. The second time, but I'm guessing that as time goes on, we're going to, and these methods become more and more sensitive. Maybe they'll be able to get a little bit more conclusive evidence there, because I think the fact that they haven't been able to rule anyone out explicitly on DNA alone is quite telling.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I feel like there are some people who are excluding people based on DNA, and I don't feel like that should be the be all and end all of this case. Because DNA being there or not being there, I really don't know that that is because the DNA evidence isn't so solid. How can you just say, oh, therefore the DNA evidence we've got doesn't match, therefore that person wasn't involved?
Yeah,
I think there's far more to this case than
yeah,
just that.
I fully agree.
Especially when you think about the fact of, okay, if it's a family member and a household where she's lived, their DNA is everywhere.
Yep,
Like, so again, DNA, I don't think should be the be all and end all in this case.
that's it. And the unknown male DNA, they were saying, it could have come from the night before if she was, playing with someone, whoever's helped get her into her pajamas.
Mhm.
There's lots of different ways. It could have even been from like somebody who touched the garment at another time, like inside, especially inside her long johns, inside her pajama
I
pants.
even read somewhere that potentially they were talking about the fact that the DNA was so small, so such a slight amount. It could have even been in a manufacturing process.
Yep,
That the DNA could have been left there from, so, I mean, you're never gonna find that one person out of that, factory that where those long johns were made,
yeah,
to go, "Oh, there's where that DNA matches up." I mean, that's just, you're not gonna exclude it that way. You're not gonna
yeah,
be able to hunt that person down. So,
yeah,
um, God, I mean, you couldn't, that's just impossible. So,
yeah.
if that's where the DNA's come from, and then we're relying on DNA for evidence as being someone who was present at her murder.
And I mean, imagine how much contamination there would have been, or just like how disturbed it would have been with just John bringing her from where she'd been, well, laid. We don't know whether she was actually murdered in that spot or not.
Mm.
through upstairs,
Yep.
through to the kitchen or wherever she ended up, and what could have potentially been lost in that process. Like, you just don't know.
Well, they moved her twice too because he put her down, I think, like, near the Christmas tree or something, and
Yeah.
then they picked her up and moved her from there to somewhere else, and then someone put a blanket over her.
Yeah.
And so, which is another contamination, like,
Yeah.
now there's, fibers from that blanket
Yeah.
intertwining with other things
Yeah.
and that wasn't part of the scene. So
Yeah.
it's just been, unfortunately, as much as, like, you can feel for the parents in that moment and doing those sorts of things, but at the same time, it's potentially ruined any evidence that was there to be able to, you know, yeah, find a solution to this and find evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that brings us to like the two different theories in what happened on that night.
Yeah.
So there are two main theories going about. One is the intruder theory, meaning that somebody's come into the house and waited, murdered JonBenet and left. And the other theory is that somebody in the family did it. So should we explore the family first and then go into the intruder theory, do you think?
Ooh, which one to go first? Because it's
Oh,
so interesting, isn't
I
it?
know.
Because yeah, it really is two schools of thought, and people usually are in one camp or the other camp.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's an interesting one because so yeah, I don't know. Where does your brain do you fall into one camp? Which where's your
I
brain
It's
falling?
really interesting. Do you? Do you fall into one camp?
What day is it? I literally find myself going like down a rabbit hole of like one and going, oh no, this is where it goes, and I'll go, no, don't be so close minded, and go the
I
other way and get really, oh, this could be it too. Like
Yeah,
so,
I feel exactly the same, although every time I get to the end of, like, reading something or thinking about it, I tend to err on one side.
me too. Yeah,
What side do you err on?
I I end up usually landing somewhere at someone in the family.
Same, same.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Cool.
interesting.
Great.
Because
Yep.
I mean, you can find evidence to back up either theory and very
Yes.
compelling evidence to fight to back it up.
And look, I find
Um,
myself wanting it to not be someone in the family. Like, I
Totally.
was really honest with that because the interviews I have heard with Patsy Ramsey, the interviews with John, and to some extent, not so much the ones with Burke.
Yeah.
um, I am very sympathetic to the family. Very the way they speak, the way they present themselves, to me says innocence, and I
Uh,
feel for them.
who's paying for those? Like, and the ones where the family are involved. Like, have you listened to the podcast The Killing of JonBenet?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so the family's very heavily involved in the production of that podcast, and to me it seems incredibly biased. They don't
Yes.
even they gloss over the fact that the family was even potentially implicated, and they're incredulous at the thought that the family could have potentially been involved, and I just think that's
Yeah.
really
Because that
skipping over.
whole that whole podcast, I first listened to that not realizing what I was listening to. Like, you know what I mean? I went in very blind,
Yeah,
and had no idea about their involvement in that podcast or their relationships with anybody around the investigation or
yeah,
those sorts of things. I did not. I actually went into it kind of going a bit mind blown about what I was listening to be honest, until I put on my good brain and went, hang on a second here. And I found myself listening to it still with a lot of like the evidence they were presenting, going, "Oh, see, that strongly says it's the family." And then
yeah,
the way the podcast would then try and flip it around, and I still wouldn't believe, like, I
yeah.
still would be going back to, you
Going,
can't tell
oh,
me that that evidence isn't relevant. Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's still with my brain of like a total not thinking, not understanding who had produced it,
yeah.
was still flipping me back to it was someone in the family.
Yeah. So there
So,
you go. Like, even something that's sort of slightly biased towards the intruder theory, you've
mm,
still come back around. And I feel like
yeah,
that's the same with me. Sort of at the end of the day, when I think about it, I think, oh, to me, it's just so much more plausible. All right, let's talk about the
yeah.
intruder theory first.
Let's
Get
do
that
that.
out of the way, and then we
Yeah,
can go
let's do
into
that.
why we think
Yeah.
what we
I think
think.
what we need to really, like, mention then in terms of the intruder theory was that the police very much felt that it was someone, the Boulder police believed it was someone in the family fairly strongly, and there was this like the family were very like, this isn't us and you're only focusing on us. We need someone to look at this from a different angle. And somewhere along the line, this Lou Smith got brought into the mix. And he basically apparently was believing it was the family first, but then, then he decided no, it's definitely an intruder. That's the theory that's what they've put out there about his perspective,
Yep.
that he was convinced one way and was very adamantly convinced the other way once he looked at the case.
Yeah.
But again, that's something that Lou Smith and the party on that side of things are presenting.
Yeah.
So this Lou Smith, he then investigated it on this entire base of it being an intruder theory.
Mm-hmm.
He worked tirelessly on this case for, many, many, many years.
I think it was over 20 years.
20 plus years. So he's now passed away.
Yep.
And he has passed on all of his files to his daughter. And now she is carrying on that legacy of his to continue ruling out people that he then came up with this, basically a spreadsheet of potential suspects who would be the intruder on this case.
Are there over 200 people on the spreadsheet or something like that? It's a lot.
It's a lot, but the podcast, that particular podcast, narrowed it down to about 10 that they went over, who were their top 10.
Yep.
Now, those top 10, I believe, by the end of that podcast were all ruled out.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. So,
notably, no one from the family was in the top 10.
No, it's all intruder.
Yeah.
So we can go over some of the intruders.
Yeah, tell me. So for me, the things that dispel the intruder theory are, so when the police were doing the walk around of the house and to see whether somebody could have potentially gotten in, they did find an open window to the basement that you could access from the outside of the house. A couple of things really stand out here for me. Firstly, apparently the window only wound a certain amount, so they couldn't open it fully necessarily unless they unscrewed the hinges to be able to get a fully grown person through that window. The second thing is, if they're claiming that that's the point of entry of an intruder, there were undisturbed cobwebs around the window. So not only would they have had to have gotten through a window that was probably too small for an adult human to fit through, how could they have then also gotten through the window without disturbing cobwebs or any of the vegetation around the outside of the window? And then how would they have gotten back, so to get into the house, that is, to get back out of the house, the inference is that they would have gone out the same window. How did they get up to the window? I think there was a suitcase close by, but there were never any footprints found on the suitcase or something. So it's not like they've used that as leverage to kind of get them up and out the window.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, even though the intruder didn't take her with them, we know that, they would have had to have, I mean, if there was a ransom note there, therefore the plan would have been to have left with her.
Yep.
So, what was their plan to get her out?
Well, I think the theory is that they were going to put her in that suitcase and take her out in the suitcase.
But then I think one of the theories I heard was that when they realised they wouldn't be able to get the suitcase out, that's when they decided to kill her. Which they've just ruined their ransom money they're getting. Like, why would they have bothered with all of that?
So, I mean, we talked about the ransom note before. It's really long. Like, it was pages, a couple of pages long.
Yeah.
And so I think the theory is that this intruder has broken in while the Ramseys were at their Christmas party, has waited and had enough time to use the Ramseys' own stationery and pens, and the intruder didn't bring a note with them, which is interesting in and of itself. Like, they've written the note at the house and laid in wait until they got home and waited until everyone was asleep. They then used a stun gun on JonBenet, and apparently the house was mostly carpeted, so that's how the sound would have been dulled from them walking up and down the stairs. But even then, I don't know. That doesn't even really seem plausible to me.
Well, I mean, well, the house itself too, I mean, we've looked at it online because it was up for sale not
Oh,
long ago.
love it.
It's so
Yep.
great. So if you wanna check that out, you can. I can leave the link on our socials for people.
Definitely do
So
that.
you can actually have a look. I mean, the house has been obviously renovated and things over time, but the house is over 100 years old. You can't tell me there's not a creak on those stairs. Those
Totally.
stairs would have a creak in them, even with carpet and being quiet. There's not I mean, you can't tell me a 100-year-old house doesn't have a creak in the stairs somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I'm a really heavy sleeper. Um, and I think an intruder could probably come into my house and it wouldn't wake me up, but it would wake my husband up. It would wake my dog up. Did they have animals actually?
Nothing's been mentioned
No,
anywhere
I
that I've
haven't
seen that
read
they had
anything
pets at all,
either.
no. No. I know that, and I know there was an interview with John Ramsey who was talking about that there was a security system on the house, but they chose not to use it because they lived in such a safe area.
And also, he said the noise was really annoying.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
heard him say if it ever went off, the noise was annoying, which I mean, that's
Well, that's what
what's
it's supposed
supposed to
to do.
happen.
Yeah.
um, so there were several theories of who the intruder could be.
Yeah.
Um, there was a
In the
boot, I think we mentioned before, there was a boot print left near the
Mhm.
window as well on the inside of the house, wasn't it?
Yeah, so there was a boot print that was like they called it a high-tech boot, whatever, like,
Yeah,
so some sort of because I mean, obviously in Boulder, Colorado, it gets snow, so it was some sort of like hiking kind
hiking
of
type boot.
boot. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
apparently a lot of people in the area had these high
particular
tech,
they were a
high
very
tread.
common boot. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
so
even
I
actually
feel
Burke owned a pair.
yeah. So I
Yeah,
feel as though that's kind of a bit of a moot point as well,
yeah,
potentially.
yeah, but
Um,
in they're looking at suspects, that was certainly something that it married up with a
they
few,
tried to
there were a
match.
few had
Yeah.
boots, but yeah, yeah. So as you
So I
say, there was
think
a bit of a stun gun.
the first suspect they had, I've only written down a few
I
to
think
have a
I've
chat
pretty
about. So I
much
wonder if we've got the same ones
yeah,
listed.
that'd be
But I
interesting,
think
yeah.
I think initially they looked at a man named Bill McReynolds. So he'd
Yeah.
played Santa Claus at they had I think it was a Christmas Eve party, is that right?
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
day before, and he'd played Santa Claus. Apparently, Patsy would decorate every room in the house. They'd have a massive party, invite all their friends and family. In an interview I heard with John, he actually said he regretted doing that in the aftermath of this event because he feels like that potentially opened up their home to or made their home vulnerable by letting people like Bill McReynolds in. He was
Mm,
cleared.
yeah. But interestingly, he had a child who was, killed
Yeah,
in almost similar
it
circumstances.
it was, and it was around Christmas time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and he had a very strong connection to JonBenet, they said, like, yeah, he seemed to really like her a lot.
and I think she liked him too. I think she
Mm,
wanted to show him her toys, and
yeah.
I mean, whether that connection's creepy or not, I mean, I have
I
my
know. Every
oh,
time I hear someone, like, talk about that connection, I'm often like, is it just a genuine, an older person having a genuine connection with a child that they just
yeah,
because he's lost his daughter and all those sorts
yeah,
of things? Or is it a grooming situation? Like,
yeah.
it's really, I
And I know
find it
it's
very
sad
hard.
that in this day and age you kind of go immediately to the grooming sort of theory, but
Mhm.
you have to,
As a
don't
parent,
you?
I think you do. Yeah, if
Yeah,
you're not, then yeah, you're leaving yourself vulnerable, aren't you? Yeah,
agreed. It's
yeah,
horrible, but it is what it
yeah.
is. Um,
Because I
they
think the other
also oh,
sorry,
sorry,
you go.
go.
I was gonna say, because the other thing they open themselves up to, I think, too, with a bit of regret later on, is due through her, beauty pageants that JonBenet was part of,
Good
which
point.
then there's a couple of suspects that they looked at in terms of connections to, like, whether it was photographers or pa people who
Yes,
were part of the pageant, world, who
community. Yep.
had, very much become attached to JonBenet in these weird, creepy ways, by seeing her in her competitions. I mean, very much as soon as this became public knowledge that there was this murder, photographers and things leaked photos of her from her pageants, which I mean
Which
was
that
came
that
into
I guess
scrutiny pretty
also
quickly.
then swayed the portrayal of her in the media because
Mhm.
the only images they had of her were her in her beauty pageantry,
Yeah,
and that really paints an interesting picture
Mhm.
for such a young girl. I heard a policeman who was initially on the case, I heard him interviewed, and he said when he saw a photo of her, he thought she was 14 or 15 years old, not 6
Mhm.
years old, because of the
Yeah.
way she'd been made up to look in the pageants. And I'm sure everyone's probably seen the videos and the photos. She does. She looks a lot older than 6. Even listening to her sing and
Mm.
watch her dance, I'm like, she definitely had a maturity about her.
Yeah, but then again, like, when you hear people speak about her who knew her as just a regular child, you'd hear words like tomboy and stuff mentioned around her and how she was just a regular six-year-old in lots of ways.
Yeah.
That the pageant world really was only a small part of her life,
Yeah.
and it wasn't who she was day to day. But because of us coming at it from the media perspective, like, that's all you saw, our perspective of who she was, and even of the family, make judgments around, what their goal was of that,
Yeah.
and making their child seem older than she was. But yeah, it did expose her, I think, to this icky part of the world, that these
Potentially.
people who do thrive on that, like seeing little girls like that, which just
Oh,
repulses
it's
me.
horrible.
Yeah.
It is. It's absolutely repulsive. So, touching on a few more of I guess, the prime suspects. Who have you got next on your list?
Yeah, so from Lou Smith, basically, his next one was Dario Levy. He was arrested for child molestation, and in jail he confessed to killing JonBenet. So they did, but DNA testing of him has ruled him out. Which, again, as we were talking earlier, does it? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they
Was
basically are
he
using that as their
also
benchmark.
was he the one who was also found to not be in the state or something, and they've ruled him out
Ooh.
by there was one of the top tens who had confessed, because a couple of them did confess.
Yeah, there's quite a
Um,
few of them. Yeah, they all wanted to have been the one, which is
yeah,
so. Ugh,
it blows
yeah,
my mind.
yeah.
Why would you confess to something you didn't do? I mean, that's a whole nother
Yeah, a whole 'nother
episode
thing, isn't it? That
probably.
notoriety they want. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the next one on my list is, which I actually have this guy as my top intruder theory. If that's the way where we're going to go, this is actually my top guy, I think,
Okay, who
maybe.
is it?
So Michael Helgoth.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So the bizarrest thing about this Michael Helgoth is, okay, well, let's start from the beginning, actually. He was a drug dealer, a drug taker, known to have a preference for young girls, and a bit of a sexual deviant, is the way people described him. There was a guy who came forward who actually put him in it. He went to the police saying that Michael Helgoth told me, and these were his words, it was, I have a killer deal at Christmas that will make me around 50 to 60K. Now, in the ransom note, they have asked for 118 random number, but that's $118,000 was the ransom for JonBenet, which, if it was two guys going in and doing this together
Yeah.
that he had this killer deal with, then he would have picked up 50 to 60K.
59,000.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. So, so that was what sort of sparked it for this guy to go and say
Okay.
something to the cops,
So him
which,
being your top runner, which
yeah,
I agree, if the intruder theory is correct, I agree that
mhm,
he would be my number one.
yeah.
But what is his motive? Like, why have they done it? Why did somebody want her killed?
So there was someone who was obviously wanting him to go and do this. So this other person he was splitting it with, there was obviously something there. But the weirdest thing about this whole scenario with him is that the cops were onto him, and they were like basically about to move in, from what we can gather. There was a press conference where the police said, we've nearly got someone. Literally the day after that, this guy was found dead, and it's been marked a suicide. But the suicide, the guy has somehow shot himself in the lower torso.
Yeah.
Now, that's not how someone commits suicide with a gun. Like, and
They
apparently the angle of it even is not really possible to have been shot like that by himself.
Mhm.
But not only that, the gun was found wrapped in a blanket.
Yeah.
Like,
That's the bit that I find so bizarre.
how it
And
could
so
have been ruled a
was
suicide?
he the informant then? As in, has he informed the police of what had happened, and so he'd provided the information to the police, and that's then led to his death. Or I guess the police's theory was that he thought they were coming for him and he's committed suicide, which does not seem plausible. There was an interview with one of the cops who found him, I think, or who investigated his death. And they basically said, I've been to suicide, however many suicides over my career, and I have never seen somebody commit suicide like this. It's either a shot to the side of the head, in the mouth. It's always head related. It's never in the torso. And as you said, the angle didn't match up. And then the fact that they found the gun that was proven to have been used in his death wrapped in a blanket.
Who shoots themselves and goes, oh, just carefully
Oh,
place
just
them in a
quickly, I'm just
blanket
going
and
to
put
wrap
it down
that
over here.
up and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So it's totally not, I don't know. But there were so many other things about this guy that if you want to really lean into this intruder theory, he was found with a stun gun.
Yep.
He had a pair of the boots. They actually called him the Boot Man.
Yep.
That was his sort of tag at the time.
Yep.
There was quite a number of things. Obviously, the fact that he's confessed to a guy that I've got this killer deal. That he's going to make the exact basically right amount of money as to what was being asked for in the ransom. There was lots of tick boxes that you kind of go, phew, they might have the guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
There's still not enough information for me there.
No. And because then I don't buy into the stun gun theory either. So
yeah.
I feel like then I might, is this being planted to be able to go, this is a guy, look, it lines up, because somebody really wants this intruder theory. And that's where because I have another theory on the marks that were on her body than a stun gun.
Oh, what's your theory?
Oh, I think it's the train.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Toy.
The train track. Yep.
The train track in the house. Yes.
Yep. No, yeah. Fair call. I know they also looked at one point. This is not one of the top 10, but I just found it really interesting that they had the family's housekeeper as a potential suspect as well for a while.
Who was that?
So her name was Linda Hoffman Pugh, and I think they were looking at anyone who had access to the house without having to break in.
Yep.
And so they really deep dived into her. I mean, she was, eliminated as a suspect eventually. But imagine just being caught up in all of this, being the housekeeper. Like, to me,
that says that they didn't, that as the police, they weren't as blinded by it has to be family and no one else, as in like they were thinking theories along the line of there's no entry or exit point here. This is someone who was able to get in and out without being, without breaking windows and stuff, without, causing alarms potentially to go off. Or so someone like a housekeeper, that's worth checking out.
Plausible.
And, yeah. Maybe they weren't as bad as was made out. The cops.
Yeah. I mean, look, they definitely botched things left, right, and centre, but that's not to say that they didn't have, some good working theories at the same time. So the next big ticket suspect was John Mark Carr.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, he is a piece of work. I was just actually talking to Emma earlier. If anyone really wants to go and check it out, he has his own official website, this piece of shit.
Total pieces.
So, yes, JonMarkClar.com. Anybody who really is, wants to go and check it out, because it's a read.
Let me just really quickly, just read the first, this little blurb that he's got on his website.
Yeah.
The media and the public controls the narrative about me. If they say I was delusional, lying sack of shit in 2006 about a high-class little girl they think I was too pathetic to even meet, the public latches onto that lie and now promotes it on social media, adding their own lies in their own posts about me on platforms like Facebook, Reddit, and X. I'm like, who do you think you are? And as you said, when we were discussing this before we were recording, he calls her a high-class little girl.
Isn't that
Oh,
repulsive?
it's disgusting.
Even the photo he's got of her on his website, which I just think is just it should not be allowed that he
Agreed.
even has access because it's got his little watermark thing on the bottom of that photo.
I know.
Why on
It's
earth
so
should he have
possessive.
right to
Yeah.
use that image? I really don't know.
Yeah.
The whole website it's literally just a manifesto from this total creep. There's a number of photos actually he's got on her website of her on his website that just ugh, yeah. Yeah.
Creepy.
Oh god.
Absolutely
Oh,
creepy.
and then I just scrolled down further, which I hadn't gone as far as that. There's actually a photo of him at 7 years old.
Yeah.
Why would he put a photo of that on there?
Oh, he's
Oh
just
my god.
so
And
creepy.
if he looks creepy as a man, he looks even creepier as a 7-year-old. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. Oh,
Yes.
I'm just scrolling now too, and he's got stuff in there about Madeline McCann. Oh my god. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we've given him too much airtime already.
But yeah, so he was obsessed with JonBenet and yeah, he didn't live too far from them either.
No.
Yeah, which was really
So
gross.
when he confessed, he confessed that he killed her by accident after drugging and sexually assaulting her. Although no drugs were ever found in her system following toxicology analysis at autopsy. And he's the one who it's questioned whether or not he was actually even in Boulder at the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, he definitely lived in the area, and he was
Yes.
seen in the background of for video photography from her pageants in the months leading up.
Yes.
He was stalking her, I don't know, or others at the pageants and things.
Yep.
And he had kidnapped another girl.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was
So, I
a
mean, he
lot
certainly was worth looking
boring.
into, that is for sure. But, oh, creepy.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. But then, yeah, he
His
was sort
DNA
of
doesn't match either.
no,
No,
not even close. So
no.
they've eliminated him as a
Yeah.
suspect.
Yeah. The only
So
other one that in the intruder theory one that I was wanting to go have a look at was actually Sandra Henderson, and I find this one really really interesting.
Okay.
They've ruled her out and everything, but basically she was embezzling money from John Ramsey's company. So there was the theory that she had done it out of well, she was actually the next to be in his role. She
Yes.
was so they actually had a theory that it was her based on like jealousy of his success and things. And so, but her stepsons were interviewed. They couldn't get a hold of her to sort of chase her down and rule her out by DNA and things. But they spoke to her stepsons, but they did not have a good opinion of her at all. But their opinion was that basically there's no way that she would have ever been able to kill a child. And they both commented individually that there was no way in hell that they would have done it for her either. So yeah, they were very adamant that you can take her off your list. Like that's not who she is.
Yeah.
But I love the way that the two of them were really no love lost there.
No.
Yeah.
She didn't do it, but
No.
even if she had, we sure as shit wouldn't have helped her.
No. Yeah. So both their DNA, the stepson's DNA was excluded as well. But yeah. I just thought that was good.
Interesting.
Very
I
good.
guess that now leads us to the family theory. So
Yeah.
I guess at the time there were 3 family members at home. There was
There was obviously Patsy, Mum, John Ramsey, Dad, and Burke. There was also then John Ramsey's other son from his previous relationship, but he did not arrive until the following day.
the following
Even
morning.
though the following morning, yeah. So he was meant to meet up with them to go traveling, but he
Yeah.
was put in the mix in terms of a suspect for quite some time. When he wasn't even he was certainly not even in the state when it happened.
I think
and that's
they
well
were able to
proven.
prove that he was flying when it happened or something. Like they were
Well,
absolutely
he was at the airport and they had to hand him a note or something to say, you need to call your dad before you get on the flight. Because
Yes.
he was flying to somewhere where he's going to be meeting up with them.
Yeah, so he was flying into Denver. That's right. He was flying into Denver.
And they were basically saying,
yeah.
no, you don't fly. You need to contact your dad. Because, I mean, this is back before mobile phones, really.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he rang his dad who told him she's been kidnapped. At that stage, we've just found a ransom note.
Yeah.
So then they changed their flight to Boulder to go to Colorado. So, yeah, so they certainly he was not nowhere in the vicinity. It was very
No.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Although
but
I
still the
know,
cops did look at him very closely.
yeah, and I know um, there's theorists online who still think that he could have potentially done it, but I think that's been well and truly,
Yeah.
yeah,
No way.
excluded.
He was with his girlfriend at the time. Like
Yeah,
there was
he had an
definitely
alibi, a
witnesses.
really strong alibi. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I guess the John the JonBenét Ramsey theory is that, and I guess the John and Patsy is kind of rolled into one, isn't it? Or there's several theories.
Yeah.
Um, one of them is that John was sexually assaulting JonBenet, and Patsy was complicit in it, in that she knew it was happening and didn't do anything about it. And then that night, apparently JonBenet used to wet the bed most nights, and Patsy got really frustrated about having to change the sheets again, and has somehow ended up striking her and killing her, or strangling her. And because they're both sort of guilty in a way of a crime against her, that they've covered it up for each other. Because one of the things is that even over the course of the last 20 odd years, or how many years is it now? 20 whatever, it's coming up for nearly 30 years, 27 years.
Yeah.
That they never turned on one another. It's probably worth noting that Patsy has passed away. She died of, I think it was ovarian cancer, was
Ovarian
it?
cancer, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So she's no longer alive, but up until the day of her death, she and John claimed innocence,
Mm-hmm.
and neither has come out saying anything against the other. So that's one theory.
Yep.
Which is plausible, possible.
Yep.
Who knows? The theory that I like the best, though,
Yeah, it
is
sounds like
that,
we're on the same page.
yeah, is that Burke was involved. So there are a few interviews out there with Burke. One with Dr. Phil,
Mhm.
who, I mean, he's questionable in and of his own right.
Yep.
That's, again,
Another podcast for another day.
another podcast for another day for sure. But he is interviewed by as in Burke is interviewed by Dr. Phil, and I just find watching that interview so incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, look, there was a perspective on that I listened to the other day, and I there's a bit of water to this, I think. The guy sort of was saying that the smile on Burke's face throughout that interview, he didn't see it as, and he was an analyst of sorts, like
Yeah.
he was, good in his field, knew what he was looking at. And
Yeah.
he said he didn't see it as an evil kind of, thing. He saw it as a very nervous tick sort of thing for him to be smiling like that.
Yep.
Which, yeah, is a theory. It's a theory. I don't know how much I buy into it or not.
Again, I mean, I don't know what it's like to have your sister murdered or be implicated in that, but
yeah,
there just seems to be something about him. There's something about John Ramsey that doesn't sit right with me. He's had that, I don't know, it's his manner around the whole thing, and I know a lot of time has passed, but
yeah.
His
having
daughter
said that, sorry, go.
No, his daughter was murdered.
Mm.
And
I was thinking the other day about that whole thing of, like, your child's been murdered, and not only murdered, but it is one of the most known cases in the world. How do you live your life having done it or not? I'm not commenting on that in this scenario. How do you live your life that you are JonBenet's parent, JonBenet's sister, JonBenet's brother, whatever, like you are always linked to that. It's no matter what you do in your life every day, you are that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it would be horrendous having it in your life 24/7.
Yeah. It'd absolutely have an impact.
Yeah. And so and that's where I question that whole, if it's family, how do you live with yourself and not break? And if you know who did this, or if you don't know who did this, how do you live with that? Like, it's, that neither scenario
Neither,
works
yeah.
well for me.
How can you live with yourself? I
Yeah.
heard. I think it was that same analyst who was saying, "Oh no, actually, it wasn't." But somebody was saying that it'll be interesting once John dies, if Burke knows something, whether he'll come out with some more information then, because if
Mm,
Patsy and John were implicit in the murder, how did Burke not know about it? The other thing I find really bizarre is John had gone to tell Burke that JonBenet had gone to heaven,
mhm.
and then Burke stayed in his bed for
But did
hours.
he? No, but did he?
But did he?
Because that's, as you were saying at the very beginning of this, when
It's
we talked about the 911 call,
yeah,
there is a question mark over the 911 call because there is a moment when, and this is back in the 90s when it wasn't mobile phones and it certainly wasn't like digital things, that she hung up the phone, which would have not, it didn't quite click into place, and therefore it didn't hang up, even though, I mean, I think the 911 caller was actually wanting her to stay on the line, not
yeah,
hang up.
because she's going Patsy, Patsy,
Yeah.
Patsy. Yeah,
But she's, like, hung up,
yeah,
but she hadn't hung up entirely, so
yeah,
there's a bit of audio left at the end of that recording between what's happened after she's hung up the call,
yeah.
and in that recording, which they have, different people have different theories on what was said there, but there is a definite child's voice,
Yes.
and there's definitely a man's voice, and then there's definitely a female voice.
Hmm.
So there's 3 different voices, and what they say is interesting if they are being able to really hone in and get that audio, which, as I say, different people have different theories on what's said, but
Mm.
even no matter what's said, the voices are definitely different.
There's
There's
three.
definitely 3 different voices.
Yeah.
And so in that case, that blows that whole thought out of the water in terms of that, "Oh, no, Burke has slept through all of
He was
this,"
asleep
because
the whole time.
he was awake when the 911 call was made.
Hmm. Which was
So,
well and truly before 5:55, because that's when the
yeah,
police arrived. So interesting, you know,
yeah,
very, very interesting. So, I mean, I guess the leading theory for me is that Burke has murdered her. I would say accidentally. Like, what 10-year-old's going to, deliberately
mm,
murder his sister? There's been some kind of altercation. Something's happened. He's gotten angry. Something's
yeah.
gone awry, and he's murdered her. And then John and Patsy have covered it up.
So, yeah, so with that theory, I link that up a little bit. So, in the months leading up to her murder, she visited the doctors 18 times
Yeah.
for bumps and bruises, which is not normal. I mean, I understand that she's in this pageant world and, these sorts of things, but there was something going on around that. I mean, for bumps and bruises, you don't often take your child to the doctor. So Patsy was, I guess, in some ways protective and overprotective, maybe, I don't know, with taking her to the doctor.
Hmm.
Or
Well,
was she trying to showcase that something was happening to her daughter?
that's
Um,
what makes me think that there was some kind of sexual assault taking place, because and if Patsy's trying to maybe not be the one to say that out loud necessarily, maybe she's wanting a doctor to find that or
well, that's
suggest
where
that
I
so it's
kind
not
of
her.
lean a little bit into the fact that she didn't know, like, as in, maybe there was more going on with Burke than she knew, but she was like, "There's something going on here, but I don't know what it is."
Mhm.
And, I mean, I don't like to put theories out there of small children because at the age of 10, he's not, um, his brain hasn't developed enough to know what he was maybe even doing.
Mhm.
But these things can happen. And maybe he was doing things to her really inappropriately, and this was
Yeah.
maybe going on for a while that she was like, "There's something happening here, and I don't know what."
Yeah.
Because then we link up too, then there's these marks that were found on her body
Yeah.
that Lou Smith has marked as, there was 2 of them on her body, that
Stun
he
gun.
believed
Yeah.
they were stun gun marks.
Yeah.
But they also do line up with the train track in the basement,
Yeah.
that maybe he had hit her, like, maybe as kids
Like
do,
stabbed her
had
with
stabbed
the
her with the
yeah.
train tracks,
Yeah.
That, I mean, yeah, kids do things like that. But
Yeah.
they it always gets talked about that she was murdered and strangled. But in actual fact, the blow to the head would have killed her alone.
Mhm.
So it would have taken longer, but there is, evidence there of the medical notes that suggest that the blow to the head would have killed her alone
Mhm.
if the strangling that occurred actually wasn't that much. It didn't take much of a strangulation to kill her because of
The blow to the
the
head.
hit to the blow to the head.
Yeah.
So there's there we've when you look at the evidence in terms of her being tied up, the tape on her mouth,
Mhm.
it was more for show. The mark that, the ties around her arms and things like that, her wrists weren't that tight.
They weren't tight, no.
Nothing around her feet wasn't that tight. And the stuff on her mouth, the tape, they have found that there was no DNA from on the inside of the tape. Therefore, she was quite possibly dead when the tape went on
That's
because
a
there was
theory.
no.
I think that's hard to prove, but I mean,
Yeah.
that has been said. Yeah.
So if you're with putting those things
Well,
together,
I think they didn't find any saliva on the tape when they took it off,
yeah,
but then
that's right.
John's taken it off when he found her.
Yeah,
So God only knows. Like even I don't know. Who knows? His fingers might have taken. I mean, it's hard to
yeah,
say.
that's
Um,
true. That's true.
but yeah, and I think another part of that is that in support of that theory is that they can see that she has been sexually assaulted, but the fact that there was no semen present
Mhm.
suggests it may have been Burke
Mm,
um, who assaulted her. That supports that theory, I suppose. I mean, the
yeah.
thought of it is horrific.
As I said, I don't like to go there, but it's
No,
actually what makes more sense in some
yeah,
ways. As much as it doesn't make sense, it does.
yeah,
Because the other thing we haven't touched on is what was the food that was found in her stomach.
yes,
So the family's story is that they got home from a big day of Christmas celebrations and she was pretty much asleep in John's arms and they
yeah. I
put her
think they
into
got home at
bed.
like 9:30 at night,
Yeah.
and she was already asleep in the car, and he moved her asleep from the car
Mm,
into her bed.
yeah. So if
Burke
she was they're
claims
saying she
Burke
was asleep.
yeah, Burke claims that the last time he saw her alive was when she was asleep in the car.
Yeah.
However, they
There's
found
yeah.
pineapple in her stomach or remnants of pineapple in her stomach, and there was a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen bench that had Burke's fingerprints and DNA on it.
Yeah. So then again, I mean, the family are saying the last meal she ate was at the house they were at for the celebrations.
Yeah,
But the evidence in her stomach is suggesting that she did eat pineapple.
yeah.
And so if Burke also ate pineapple,
Mhm.
what did he get her up during the night? And did the two of them sit there and have pineapple together?
Mm.
And did something then happen from there?
Escalate, yep.
And that does then eliminate there being need for entry and exit into the house.
Mhm.
That we can't find any evidence of really.
Mm.
So the only
And
thing
then
then is
John
left is the ransom note,
yeah.
and which this whole case, even if you're looking at it intruder theory, that ransom note is the most bizarre thing ever.
It's so crazy. It's ridiculous. Should we read it out?
Oh, let's, because it is next level. Read it.
Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We, and then do is crossed out. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence a earlier delivery, and then deliveries being crossed out, earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do, and then not has been sort of written above, particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory. SBTC.
Oh,
There's
so much to go through.
so much to unpack there. So we represent a small foreign faction.
Yeah. So there was a theory around the fact that this was, retaliation of some sort of the company that he worked for.
Yeah.
But no one's come forward to, claim that.
No.
Which, says
So
something.
it's like it's been written to sound like a terrorist act almost, but or, being politically motivated in some way.
However, when you break the letter down at the absolute core of it, it's movie after movie after movie. I mean, don't grow a brain, John.
Yeah.
It's Keanu Reeves in Speed and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a bizarre letter. Like no sane person has written this letter.
No. I think there's also like around the $118,000 John had received a bonus, but when he talks about it, he'd actually received it much earlier in the year, but it was around that amount.
So it has to mean someone who knew how much he got for
that's
bonus.
what they're saying, because that's not a coincidence.
No, but it's still a stupid amount for so many reasons. One simply being, why wouldn't you round it up to 120 or 115?
Mm-hmm.
Or the simple fact of the matter is he's a multimillionaire. He was worth $6 million at this time.
$6.5 million, at the time.
Why wouldn't you have asked for a cool $1 million or even $500,000?
Yeah.
He could have paid that.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to make sense. Even if you look at the ransom note on its own without the rest of the other stuff that doesn't make sense, the ransom note on its own is very weird. If you're genuinely in the house kidnapping this child, you're not going to sit and write a 2.5-page letter. There's so much more easy ways to have written, we have your daughter. We will contact you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow. Have the money ready. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
It doesn't need 2.5 pages of the other stuff.
Yeah. The other thing the police sort of put against John is that 10 o'clock came and went the next day. So I guess when they say tomorrow, do they mean the 26th or the 27th?
Yeah.
I think the theory is that they wrote it on the 25th, so they mean the 26th.
But they could have written it very early hours of the morning of the 26th and meant the 27th.
That's it. And so one of the criticisms by the police of John is that 10 o'clock came and went and he didn't completely lose it. So obviously by 10 they still hadn't found JonBenet's body yet. And so at that stage, he supposedly should think that she's still missing. 10 o'clock comes and goes and no call. why wasn't he more distraught? Why wasn't Patsy more distraught at that time?
Yeah.
John says it's because he thought logically that maybe they did mean the 27th and not the 26th. But thinking about that as a parent, that would, if 10 o'clock came and went and I was in his situation, I'd be beside myself.
Yeah.
Even on the 26th, not even thinking about the 27th.
I also go back to the fact of like, okay, my child's missing, my world has gone. And in this note, it says that if I contact police or FBI or anybody, I'm killing my child. Right? So what would you do in that scenario?
I would call the police
But
because
would you call from your home phone?
no, I don't. I don't know. I actually don't know. I have thought about this. What else were they supposed to do?
I know. I know. I do agree.
So I would.
100%.
I mean, nobody in that house had the capability of dealing with this on their own if they weren't involved. So I think I would. I think I would call the police. And
But
whether
would
I
you
would
call
do
them
that from
and
my
say on that phone call, there's a ransom note here that's telling me not to call you. What
yes,
on
that's
earth
what
do
I
I
would
do?
say.
Because I wouldn't want anyone rocking up with a marked car,
Mm-hmm.
let alone sirens.
Yep.
Like, that would be my immediate thing of, like, someone rocking up in my house in a marked police car would be
Yep.
the last thing I want.
Yep.
So, to me, I would almost want to exit that house to go and seek the help somewhere else where I'm not being potentially watched.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, that totally makes sense.
Whereas they did not
Would you
they
think
didn't.
that rationally in that time though?
I
At the
would.
time?
Like, I don't know. Am I weird?
I don't know because, like, I mean, if you really genuinely think your child's just been kidnapped, I don't know that I could think straight. Like,
No, true. But the last thing I would want would be a marked police car at the front
I
of my
think
house.
that's completely sensible.
I would think that the police would. I mean, the other side is,
But
do you just
she
assume the
didn't tell
police
them.
knows
She
to do
said
shit like that?
she said there's a ransom note when she rang, but she didn't say that they
It said
weren't
not
to
to
call the
call you.
police. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't. That would really stress me out. That the one thing
Yep.
they've told me not to do is call police, and I'm immediately doing that. That to me would be immediately like, oh my god, I'm now killing my child because I've
Yeah.
done what they told me not to
Yep.
do.
Yep.
So that would be my immediate
Yep.
not to not do it. Like, as in, I'm going to do it, but I need to find a way to do that without them knowing I've done
A
it.
little safer than just ringing from
Yeah.
her phone. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, the police theorise that John didn't react at that 10 o'clock phone call because he already knew she was
Very
dead.
interested. Dead. So yeah, this is the thing. So the
And
theory, I
maybe
guess, is
that's
around
another
that.
reason why they've called 911 because how else were they going to inform the police?
That's right. So the theory is, in this situation that we're putting forward, I guess, is that Burke has unfortunately somehow killed his sister.
Yeah.
And then the parents are like, what the hell, what are we going to do with this? And have colluded and decided, like, this is what we'll do. We'll say she's been kidnapped. But I don't know how much further they thought that through, because did they then think, once, okay, we've got this ransom note, will we then go and dump her somewhere later and then she'll get found there and that's how this would play out? Or did they get to a point where, like, oh gosh, people aren't leaving the house to look for her, they're staying in the house to look for her, we've got to somehow move this along, and have gone and, oh, here we go, we found her, she's here. I don't know. Like, I don't think any of this played out how anyone. You couldn't have written this script. You know what I mean? There's no way you could have predicted how the police were going to react when they came in this scenario.
Yeah.
And did what they did. I don't know. What was the thing? I don't know. That's when my
I think
mind
you're
just
right. I
goes.
don't think they planned it through entirely because look, my thought is Burke has accidentally killed her. I don't think he's deliberately killed her, but in whatever's happened, in the course of whatever happened, she's wound up dead.
Yeah.
They haven't had a huge amount of time then to formulate a plan and think it through. They would have been in such a state if that's the case. They probably couldn't think it through.
In this scenario, I mean, that's what if this is what we're putting forward. As parents, you trying to protect the other child you've got. On a level, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you've still lost a child. And you're devastated over that. And so they do come across in a lot of their interviews very genuine around
Mm-hmm.
their, you know, their grief and
Loss.
everything.
Yep. Yep.
So, you know, and that's where you get confused then around, are they part of this? Because there's genuine grief. But I guess there would be, regardless. They're not
Yeah.
cold-blooded murderers, none of them, you know.
No.
But if this was actually genuinely an accident by Burke, if they had just been honest, if that's what happened and had been honest, what would have been the outcome? Because if he's 9, 10 years of age, his conviction, if there was to be one, would have been wiped from records once he turned 18 and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you know, potentially this would never have been a worldwide known case.
Yep.
In some ways they could have just moved on with their lives.
Yeah. I think so one of John's daughters had died, I think, about 4 or 5 years before this. So one of his
Yep.
older daughters, I think she was 22 at the time. She
Yeah.
was killed in a car accident. And, you know, I've heard it said that he couldn't bear losing yet another child. So he's lost his daughter, his older daughter, he's lost JonBenet, and couldn't bear the thought of losing Burke potentially to the system. And so that's been a motivating factor in covering it up.
Yeah.
It's plausible, I suppose.
Yeah.
But then you're also then for the rest of your life now carrying this.
Yeah.
I've seen recent interviews with him, and he is an old man now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still answering the same questions, talking about the same things, going over the same.
Exactly.
So this has been his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was for Patsy too, up until she died.
Absolutely. And it always being over them that the public, generally speaking, believe they're involved.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that there's definitely those who believe that of the intruder theory. I think everyone sways that way of, you know, that there was family involved in this. And so to live your life like that, that's shit. That's not a life.
Yep.
Yeah. Whether you did or you didn't, that's not a life to live. You know, like
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's very complex. We'd love to know what everyone thinks too.
Oh my gosh, yes. I want to hear other people's theories. Tell us if our theory is completely rubbish. And but I love that our theory basically all leans into each other.
Yes, we're trying not to discuss these cases beforehand and seeing whether we come up with the same theory at the end of the day. Although I think our brains work in a very similar way, so I'm not surprised that we came to the same conclusion.
Yeah, but I mean, I honestly think that we're not the only ones who go down that track, and so therefore there's got to be something in it. You know, as good detectives as we are, you know, we know not to just be narrowly thinking about one way. But
and I think we said this at the start as well. Like researching this, we could see plausible explanations for both theories. It's just what seems more likely.
Yeah, yeah. And as sad as the most possible outcome is, it does make it. There's too many things connecting that scenario. That being the way it went down.
Yeah,
it's more connections there than there are in any of the other intruder theory ones.
That's it.
I mean, I would hate to be their parents in that situation 100%, but I don't think I would do what they did if that's what they did do. Like, I don't think that's how I would react. I'd like to think I don't know. I really don't know. It's so hard.
I agree. I mean, hopefully we'll never know what that's like to be in that position. Gotcha. But I would like to think that I wouldn't cover up a murder, even if it was for the sake of my child. It's impossible. If what we believe to be true is true, it's an impossible situation for them.
I would have written a better ransom note, though.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Oh God. And the handwriting.
You know what, though?
Someone's tried to fake that handwriting.
Yeah. You know what, though? It has really thrown things. So maybe it's done what they wanted it to do, because it's wacky. But how did they even come up with that?
I mean, I read that John Mark Carr website, right? And I mean,
the ramblings of a
is
lunatic.
not something I would call him, but
yeah,
it's certainly different style of thinking and writing than what is even in that note.
Yeah.
Even though he likes to write a long, lengthy post, like
Yeah.
he's certainly up for a long ransom note. I could see that, but it certainly wouldn't be written in movie quotes.
Yeah, that's it.
Because, I mean, you can literally go through that. I mean, people have gone through that note, and every section of it can almost be pulled out of a movie.
Yeah.
That you go through, you know, a list of movies that got ransom notes in it up until 1996, and literally they all pop out.
Yeah, and I believe one of the lines, I can't remember the exact line, was in a movie that had been released only like 2 or 3 weeks before a murder.
Ransom, the movie Ransom with
that's right.
Yeah.
How did I not remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're saying, so it has to be someone who's been to see that movie in the last 3 weeks or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's wacky.
I mean, and I have to say though, like, I mean, this day and age, we can literally sit here and Google, you know, what the ransom notes are out of movies prior to 1996, you know.
Yeah.
They couldn't have done that. So that's pretty impressive to be able to pull out. I mean, is that just a brain thing of like remembering, oh, this is how things get written in movies? You know, this is how you do a ransom note, and that person's just got a very good memory for those things in movies.
Or was it researched
not word
prior?
for word. Sorry.
No. Or was it researched prior?
Yeah, or was it researched prior? Yeah, or was it just, you know, hey, I've watched lots of movies and I know how to write a
vaguely
ransom
remember
note.
this.
Yeah, don't grow a brain, John.
Yeah,
that was just so obviously speed. It was just
exactly.
Oh man,
like the bit where it, you know, and it's like, if she does this, she dies.
Yeah, that's another one. It's so famous. Like yeah.
Oh,
I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Wow. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening.
Well, no, we're hoping that this is a lot of fun for everyone. So if you can hit subscribe, or as our kids would say, hit like and subscribe.
They don't have their own YouTube channels, by the way. They just like to think they do.
Yeah. But if we hit subscribe, that means that our podcast will get out there to more people, and we'll know that you're actually listening and enjoying it. We have lots of social media too. Jump on Facebook, Two Crime Besties. We're on Instagram.
We are on Instagram.
We're on Instagram.
At Two Crime Besties on there as well. Yep.
And jump on, have a look. We'll post some stuff on there. We might pop up the ransom note on our socials and that link to the lovely John Mark Carr's website, maybe, or should we not direct people there?
Oh, look, it's an interesting one. We'll pop it up there.
Well, I don't want to promote him. That's all. Yes. No. Thanks for listening, everyone. And as we say, stay curious, besties.
See you next week.